House Republicans moved this week to block Indiana University from using state money to fund the Kinsey Institute. As Ethan Sandweiss reports, the Research Center on Human Sexuality has been a target in the culture wars for more than 7 decades.
An amendment to the state budget bill was proposed Wednesday by Republican Rep. Lorissa Sweet of Wabash. It would bar the university from providing state funds to the institute for everything from research to paying utilities. Without evidence, she accused the institute of harboring sexual predators.
We, as the governing body, need to put limits on the access to tax dollars we allow Indiana University to garner by denying such funds to be directed towards Kinsey Institute.
The House approved the amendment 53-34 and advances the bill to the Senate. President of the American Association of University Professors IU chapter, Ben Robinson, wants the university to respond by increasing support for Kinsey research, which focuses on human sexuality, sexual health, and relationships.
And the best, most effective rejoinder would be to say, great, you're cutting state appropriations. Well, then we're going to fund it at a higher level using other revenue streams over which the legislature doesn't have authority.
IU historian Jim Capshew says the culture war over Professor Alfred Kinsey's research and the institute has been ongoing since the 1950s. He says the university has historically stood by its researchers.
You know, back in the day when Dr. Wells was president, famously he hung up on the governor one time because the governor was complaining and that he was getting a lot of pressure from religious leaders and other folks about Kinsey's work.
Capshew thinks it's a shame critics can't see the value of the research conducted at Kinsey.
You're not endorsing any kind of certain kinds of action, but you're endorsing the idea that you can do research on that stuff, right? And that's what a university is about.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
Now, the budget amendment is not a done deal. The state budget will go through several rewrites and would still need to pass the Senate and be signed into law by the governor. We are now joined by State Representative Matt Pierce, a Democrat whose district includes the university. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. So where did this amendment come from? It just seems like it came out of nowhere.
Absolutely. It really surprised me. And, Representative Sweet introduced it. And the thing that was so flabbergasting to me is that this is all based on old internet rumors and books and crazy attacks on Alfred Kinsey and the Institute that were made 20 years ago. So this thing really came back to life after 2 decades. So I was pretty shocked by it. And when I was questioning Representative Sweet on the floor about what was it that was happening at the Kinsey Institute, it was very vague and of some allegations of child abuse. But the interesting thing was they essentially said there were conspiracies as to why, if kids were being harmed, the law enforcement wasn't involved. And then they just, at one point she said, we just don't know what they're hiding.
There's been, this is not the first time Kinsey has been targeted. I mean, you're a lecturer at Indiana University as well. Is this something that you're really surprised upon the silence from IU on this as well?
Well, actually not so much because, these universities have their budgets approved by the General Assembly. So if they really go full bore and kind of push back hard on the General Assembly, they risk maybe getting punished in the budgetary process. And I think that actually a lot of lobbying at the State House today has gone underground. People fear that if they publicly challenge the legislators and what they're trying to do, that they'll essentially get punished in legislation or in the budget. And so most things happen behind the scenes. So I would bet a lot of money that university officials are talking directly to leadership, asking them to get this provision out of the budget bill by the time we get to final passage in April.
And I was going to ask, what happens next?
Well, there are 2 things. It'll be interesting to see. So the first thing that could happen is when the Senate traditionally rewrites their own version of the budget. So when they put their amendment in a committee, it'll be interesting to see whether they keep that Kinsey language in there or whether it comes out at that point. Another possibility is it stays in and there's a fight in the Senate on second reading to take it out. And then finally, the ultimate question where it really matters is when the conference committee is filed at the very, near the last day of the session, will that conference committee report, which is the final budget, include that provision?
There's been a lot of anti-LGBTQ and other legislation targeting sexuality the past couple of sessions. Is this something that you see continuing at the State House?
Yes, I'm really disturbed because I think that in the General Assembly, at least in the House of Representatives, we have hit a tipping point now, and it's a very strange kind of alt-right Republican Party that's emerging. I think that there's enough power within the Republican caucus now that you can even get this to the floor. There was a time when the leadership would have said, we're not going to do this, and they would have figured out a way to keep that from happening. But the fact that a brand new member of the House can bring a provision like that, demand a roll call vote, put other people on the spot. And what we saw is, yeah, some people genuinely think Kinsey should be defunded, but probably you had more people who knew it was ridiculous, but they didn't want to risk getting taken out in the primary because they didn't support this kind of QAnon conspiracy approach to legislating.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.